If you have student loans and you have been pushing off the payments, because in 2020, Trump said you didn't have to pay them, then Biden kept pushing it further and further along, saying that you didn't have to pay them. If you were in that situation, you are about to get smacked with the worst news that you've heard all decade. Apparently, the Trump administration is going to allow your wages, your taxes, your income to be garnished if your loans go into default until you are good on your payments. I know it's bad news. It's terrible news. On one hand, you did take the loan out. You knew that this had to be paid back. But on the other hand, they're literally making people lose their jobs. And that's the reason why they're not going to be able to pay. So this comes from CNN. It says Education Department to resume collecting student loans in default. Once again, they said if it's not been paid for 9 months, then it's going into default. That's when they're going to start sending you to collections and garnishing your checks and all of that stuff. The Department of Education announced Monday that it will restart collecting federal student loans in default on May 5th, ending a pandemic era pause that began roughly 5 years ago. So this did happen under Trump in March of 2020. They said, hey, enough is enough. We got to get that taxpayer money back for those federal student loans, and they're coming to collect it. More than 5 million borrowers are in default, the department said in a news release. I wonder if that's who's currently in default or who they're expecting to go into default. I read that 4 million people were expected to go into default, but here it's saying something different. Federal student loans go into default after 170 days, 9 months, without payment. American taxpayers will no longer be forced to serve as collateral for irresponsible student loan policies. The Biden administration misled borrowers. The executive branch does not have the constitutional authority to wipe away debt, nor do the loan balances simply disappear. Of course they don't disappear. Like, somebody has to pay them. And they were allocating some money in the budget to go ahead and pay them. And it was what it was. I actually had a discussion about this with my mother-in-law a couple of years back, actually before me and my wife were married. And she was telling me that this is one of the few debts, education debt, student loans, is one of the few debts that you can't file bankruptcy on and get it wiped off your credit and just, wipe the slate clean. And it makes sense. Like, you can't give the education back. So I understand, you took out this loan, you asked for this money, you went and got the education. You can't give it back. You have to pay it back to the government. So I kind of understand it. But then on the other hand, you could wipe away just about every other debt, file bankruptcy, and then wash the slate clean and start over with your life. But this is the one thing that you can't. But at the end of the day, those people did take the loan. They signed on the paper, said, I'm going to be responsible for it. You signed when you were 18, regardless of if you think it was fair or not. You were an adult. You made an adult decision. You signed it. You got the education. And hopefully you didn't get the education in nothing like left-handed basket weaving or something like that, because you're never going to make that money back that you need to pay. But let's continue on with the article. As part of the move, the Education Department's Office of Student Aid will restart the Treasury Offset Program, which collects debt by garnishing federal and state payments such as tax returns or Social Security benefits. So they're not just going to be taking your regular income, but if you have no exemptions and you're paying into the government and you're paying taxes, you might not get a return. I don't know if that's going to start this year, right? If you're expecting a return in the next 30, 60, 90 days, if you're not going to get it in that instance, or if this is going to affect your taxes for 2025. The department's Monday announcement urged default borrowers to contact the Student Aid Office's default resolution group and make a monthly payment, enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, or sign up for loan rehabilitation. The office will begin the process of administrative wage garnishments this summer. Oh, so if you weren't paying your loans, you are not going to have the summer that you thought you were going to have. If you thought that you was going on vacation this summer with all of that money you've been saving for not paying your student loans, you can think again. On top of all the things that are going on with people being scared to lose their jobs already, and prices being high already, and all this stuff going on with tariffs already, now you're being forced to actually pay back your loans, the loans that you took out that you said I'm going to be responsible for, that you haven't been paying. And probably there's some people that haven't been paying them because they can't afford it. Hey, you about to get smacked in the back of your neck with this thing they're about to roll out. So it goes on to say this comes after the Trump administration works to dismantle the Department of Education. Donald Trump signed an executive order last month directing McMahon to start the process of shutting down the department, which they said they can't do without Congress. So what they're going to do is essentially just defund it, make sure that there's no money there, so it has no staff or any way to do anything that it was previously doing. Trump later said that the SBA, the Small Business Administration, will absorb the department's massive student loan portfolio. The loan portfolio totals a staggering $1.8 trillion in debt. I understand that, like, my generation, the generation after me, and even the generation before me, people were sold the dream. Hey, you got to go to college, you get a good education, you're going to get a good job. But they thought that, like, you could go into any job, you could study anything, and it was going to end up working out. So you had people studying all sorts of stuff that the market doesn't want, or was like already a dying industry, or has died since then, right? And I'm not going to lie, it does kind of suck for the people that went to school for a degree that was coveted at the time, and then 5 years later, it just doesn't exist anymore. They don't need that. The market doesn't want it anymore. That sucks for you guys. But for people that went into school and were studying, art history or something like that, where there's already not a lot of jobs or a lot of high paying jobs, the market already told you that this is not in demand. I feel less bad for those people than the people that pursued something that was a highly sought after and a high paying job at first and kind of dwindled away with AI and programming and tech and IT. Those people I do feel bad for. The other people, you kind of set yourself up by taking out an exorbitant amount of debt without doing your market research. And me personally, I didn't have student loans. I dropped out of school. I was going to go to George Mason. They told me I had to pay $2,500 just in admin fees. I said I wasn't going to do it. The rest of my school was going to be paid for by the military through tuition assistance and the GI Bill. But when they told me I had to come out of pocket $2,500 and I didn't have it, so they suggested that I take out a loan, I said, oh, I'm done. So I got my associates and I dropped out. But let me continue on with this article. Let's see what else they have to say. The end of the multi-year pause also arises as borrowers face limited access to affordable payment programs. In an effort to comply with a recent court order to end the Biden administration's saving on a valuable education plan, the Education Department has removed applications for all income-driven repayment plans from its website, effectively locking out borrowers from adjusting their plans if they were unable to pay the standard rate. I'm not going to lie, I don't know anything about this website and how it works in the income-driven repayment plan, how much the minimum was that you could pay based on your income. I'm not an expert in that. Like I said, I didn't have student loans. But what I will say is, and I had this discussion with my wife. We were dating at the time, so it was just advice at the time that we were dating in regards to her student loans. When the pause was happening, when you weren't accruing interest, why were people not just paying the debt down? If you're not accruing interest on it and you have the money, instead of people spending their $1,200 from the stimulus checks and buying design or going on trips, trying to stunt on Instagram, why were people not putting this money towards that loan, taking everything that you could while you weren't accruing interest on your loans and trying to pay that down? People, they're too worried about trying to be flashy and showing off to the next person with their money that they don't even want to take care of their obligations. Me personally, I said it on this channel multiple times. I'm of the Dave Ramsey mindset. I don't like any debt. I don't like none of it. Like, I would buy a beater car for $2,500, $5,000 just to keep me out of debt. My wife, she's not the same. She wants to have something nice and safe for the kids. I understand that. I want my kids to be safe. But me, driving in my own car, I'm not getting no student loans. I'm not getting no car loans. I have a house loan. But everything else, I'm paying in cash. So I can't understand the mindset when they had this saving on valuable education plan where they weren't accruing interest. You didn't really have to pay during the pandemic for however long that lasted. And you weren't taking every cent that you had and trying to pay off all of this debt. So let me skip down to the end of this article. We're going to wrap this up. It says, for 5 million people in default, federal law gives borrowers a way out of default and the right to make payments they can afford. So I guess that's the income-driven repayment plan. Since February, Donald Trump and Linda McMahon have blocked these borrowers' path out of default and are now feeding them into the maw of the government debt collection machine. At the end of the day, these people did take the loan. I know that it sucks. Like, hey, you're kind of switching up the terms on me. If at the beginning of the loan process, they said, hey, it's going to be income driven, you're not going to have to pay us back, you're only going to have to pay a percentage of what you make, then that's different. If that was the promise at the time of the loan, then I feel a little bit different. But if you went and got the loan, you ran it up, 60, 80, $100,000 or even more for people that are like doctors and stuff. And then you got saved by this income driven repayment program after, then, it is what it is. You have to pay the debt that you took out. At the end of the day, you borrowed the money, you have to pay it back. The previous generations have pushed this mindset of going into debt, getting an education, and then it's just going to all work out on the back end. And we're seeing that that's not how it's playing out. And people, they're going to be crushed by this. People that have taken out all of this debt, couldn't find a good job, had a job, but got fired, whether it be just the economy in general or from Doge, the effects of Doge and all these tariffs. The way that you can avoid some pain is just not taking on all of this debt. You may have to take a longer path to get the education that you need and want, but you won't be crushed by the weight of your debts when the government decides, hey, that program that we promised you 5 years ago, we're not doing that anymore. We need our money up front and on time. So once again, this is the Trump administration saying, hey, we're going to start sending people into collections if their student loans are in default. Your student loans go into default if you haven't paid for 9 months or 270 days. If you like the video, subscribe to me back here for the next conversation. If you have something to say about student loans, about the Trump administration, if you just don't like this program or my opinion, let the world know. This is a place for discourse. Till next time. Peace.